And now for our first panel on talent. This panel will have a discussion on the talent and systems change necessary in the region to activate an innovation economy while growing educational attainment and developing resiliency in talent pipelines. The panel is moderated by Matt Horton, Director at the Milken Institute. Matt, over to you.
Well, welcome everybody to this talent development panel at the Future Forward Summit. My name is Matt Horton. I'm Director of Public Policy at the Milken Institute Center for Regional Economics and California Center. I'm really excited to be here today and joined by our esteemed guests on this panel. Mike Bishop with Cal Baptist, Anne-Marie Sakerkopf, Senior Director of Growing Inland Achievement, and Jane Oates, President of Working Nation and former Assistant Secretary of Employment and Training at the Department of Labor under the Obama administration. So as I teased out a bit at the beginning about talent and our focus here today, this panel will feature a dynamic discussion on the talent and systems change necessary in the region in order to activate an innovation economy. And I'm hoping we can dive into what we think about that in terms of an innovation economy. This whole Silicon Valley of fill in the blank gets thrown around a lot, but what does that mean in terms of enhancing access and education skills gaps and employer engagement? I think that'll be really interesting, especially now that I think we can't forget the elephant in the room, especially related to COVID and the massive amount of job displacement that I think we'll be seeing in terms of displaced workers and incumbent workers, and the need to upskill and get people back to work, and what that means for the longer term viability of the region and the state's economy. The Institute has worked a bit of this. You can see it in our standalone piece that we do every year, but Best Performing Cities Index, where we kind of measure how cities are doing across the country and in terms of economic performance and jobs and somewhat of how that's tied to workforce development. So as we get into this, I thought we'd open up with a bit of introductions, and I thought I'd let Mike from Cal Baptist start and talk to us a bit about how his background as Senior Director there at the Career Center. And then we'll get a bit into some follow-up questions and open it up to the rest of the panel and a general dialogue. So, Mike, talk to us about the Career Center and just what you're positioned to do in terms of the talent development portal through the colleges there.
Sure. Thank you, Matt. My name's Mike Bishop. I am the Senior Director of the Career Center here at Cal Baptist. I've been here approximately 7 years. Prior to that, I was in industry. So I was with Honeywell and Stanley Black & Decker. In fact, I retired as a Senior Vice President over their security operations for North America. Thought I was done at the age of 57. And then all of a sudden received a ring from the university, said, hey, we need a little bit of re-engineering done at in our Career Center. Would you be interested in doing that? And I accepted that. And I got to tell you, I have the second best job in America. After doing corporate things, I loved it, but this job is wonderful because I get to work with our students every single day. And really, what we work on hard is professional development with our kids. And it's representing themselves from a written standpoint with a resume. It's helping them to understand how to be strong in social media through a LinkedIn profile. And then how to carry on a conversation and represent and align the education that they've received with the job that they're going after. So a lot of times, students will get they'll have a degree in business or what have you, but the thing they struggle with sometimes is communicating that education they've received and talking to someone about how they fit into their organization. So we work on that very hard. Just to give you an example, 7 years ago, the university did about 38 mock interviews with students. We now do over 1,800 a year. with students to get them to practice and to get them to represent themselves. So when employers see them, they love the education piece, but really what they realize is they have someone that can communicate well, work in a team environment, and work into their system in such a way that they know they'll represent the company that they're interviewing for well.
You know, we've been working a bit at the Institute on this Future of Work Forum series over the past year and a half or so. And one of the things about the COVID crisis is really made a realization on our part and others is that the future of work is really now in terms of the job displacements that we're looking at. And as a part of that series, we've been really focused on some of those core competencies, Mike, that I think you just talked about in terms of, you know, those soft skills that that you were alluding to. How did the university come to think more intently on cultivating some of those soft skills and how they affect other, you know, employment or industry sectors, and how they cross over?
Well, a lot of it is talking to employers. So employers are our customers. So I think maybe one of the skill sets I brought to the university, I'm not the academic, but having been in the corporate sector, I understand the importance of relating to a customer. So the folks we talk with are employers. You know, say they are looking for students that just don't work in a bubble. They're looking for students that work well with others. And so those soft skills are important, and students need to be able to communicate. They need to be able to speak simply regarding some of the issues that they are working on. And when you can bring those things together, all of a sudden you have a really strong employee. So that's what our customers are telling us. That's what our employers are telling us. They want people that don't just isolate themselves, that can work well with others, that can team, that can be receptive to ideas from their fellow employees, bring those together and get a result that's pleasing and helpful to their organizations.
Yeah, I think that really resonates with what we've been seeing. I mean, you interact with students on a daily basis, especially those students being the future of the workforce. What kinds of qualities, characteristics do you see in them in terms of you know, career ambitions, sectors that they're hoping to work in? You know, part of the challenge of creating a talent hub is making sure that we retain a workforce. So maybe reverse engineering that in terms of highlighting some of those you know, in demand study areas might be able for us as regional leaders to come up with more strategies about cultivating business formation that can hopefully retain that workforce.
Right. I think, Matt, this generation is a little different. And by the way, you speak about COVID and some of the things we see going on with some of the race issues right now. Tom Brokaw might say this is the next great generation because they are being exposed to some crazy things over a 3-month period of time. And this is a generation to meet that need, because really what I see in them is they're selfless. They work well in a team environment. I think the students today are curious. I get asked a lot of good questions, and they're adventurous. So even when we see how they are having to handle COVID, and when we see some of the protests even going on in our country right now, it's not just 1 or 2 different races, it's everybody. And it's a lot of our young people who are out there protesting passionately about something they know needs to change. So that's exciting, I think, for our country. It presents an opportunity, but that's the type of employees that employers are looking for today. So they fit well together.
Yeah. Anne-Marie, you know, it says here in the bio that that Growing Inland Achievement is a cross-sector intermediary organization focused on improving the economic outlook of the Inland Empire. What does that mean in terms of talent development and how is GIA looking to bridge that education professional attainment conversation between employers and workers in the Inland Empire, excuse me, specifically?
Yes, thank you, Matt, and thank you for asking me to serve on this panel. You know, it really is an interesting time we certainly live in, and I'd like to acknowledge Mike's comments first and say, you know, I think our generation now is really in a place that we are dealing with so many things, and yet I think able to address them in constructive ways. And so it gives us the opportunity for us to collaborate together. And that's what Growing Inland Achievement is really about. It's about how do we figure out ways to collaborate and coordinate our efforts to do better by our citizenry. You know, if you think about regional capital in the Inland Empire, we think about it as a collection of education, skills, training, abilities, experiences that people can use to support community and economic development. And so GIA's role is really to help to expand those opportunities in the Inland Empire by increasing their access and ability to receive education, those skills, those abilities, those experiences that will improve our economic state, and then thereby will continue to contribute to this regional human capital development. And so GIA really sits in that space of providing support for students and for institutions of higher education and for our K-12 school districts and for our community partners and government partners to talk about these issues and to find ways to really solve those problems that we see that come up, as well as bring in innovative talent to the region.
That really rings true. And on that note, what do you think are a few of the most pressing items to that are of concern or to consider in terms of the Inland Empire when it comes to workforce development needs, and maybe what best practices are you seeing that are improving educational attainment and access, or where do you think we need to go in order to improve or cultivate a more robust workforce in terms of talent development?
Right. Well, as Mike mentioned, the idea of these soft skills or essential skills, 21st century skills, our students are learning those, but as an economy, we need to be able to move away from those automated, routine task type jobs and able to increase the ability of our students to have those college educations that then spurs the development of more high-skilled, higher-wage jobs, right? It's absolutely a chicken and egg problem, right? We know that employers aren't going to come to this area if they don't see larger growth in our college degrees. And yet, students right now don't necessarily see the value of that college degree because there isn't a local job for them. And so it's our job as we're talking to employers to say, no, we do have a talent pipeline here, and we're working hard to continue to build that pipeline. You know, Growing Inland Achievement was founded in 2015. Over the course of these 5 years, we have seen trends that are leading in the right direction that show that more high school students are prepared for college. And we're starting to see that the raw numbers of conferrals on certificates, associate degrees, and BA degrees are increasing. So the numbers are going in the right direction. Of course, now we have COVID. And so what is that going to do for that student population? We know our community colleges right now are showing between a 13 to 22% increase in enrollments. So students are staying local. So we need to think about, as a society, what are we doing with those students, with that talent pipeline that we now have here, that are able and willing and getting a good education that they can then work in the industries that we have here.
Makes a lot of sense, and I think we tend to focus a lot on 4-year kind of traditional route. But what about those middle skill career a certificate upskilling types of opportunities that A, offer more than a living wage, and B, we can use as a a catalyst to create more dynamism regionally and engage in more apprenticeship programs with employers. Are you seeing supportive measures from a GIA perspective to insulate those types of programs, or is that still like a growth industry, if you will?
I think we're in a time when we are recognizing the importance of apprenticeship. We've seen large investments from the state and federal government into apprenticeship issues. We've seen a large growth in work-based learning programs. I think of like Generation Go in San Bernardino County with the Alliance for Education, or I look at large training programs like the Intech Center that is thriving at Chaffey College, or the new center that's going in up in the high desert, and things that are happening at March Air Force Reserve Base. We have a lot of amazing programs and opportunity for people. What we see at GIA is the ability to connect these on a larger regional level. And I know WRCOG is working hard to make sure that we don't only connect with other educational entities, whether they are nonprofit certificate granting organizations or the larger universities, but they all have a role. As I mentioned, we have a lot of talent here that needs a higher education. We've been doing a lot of research on what the need is in our space. When we look at the number of students and spots that we need in our community colleges and at our four-year universities, we could see up to 40,000 students turned away from our local colleges in the next 10 years because there aren't space for them. And so what do we need to do about that? Well, we think about work-based learning starting in high school. We talk about apprenticeships. We have a lot of students going into a gap year. And so we need to think about how are they getting that work-based learning? So we can do things like digital internships. We can do things that allow students to get those skills that they need, that then employers are able to hire them in those starting positions to then work their way up into higher level positions, starting that middle skilled area.
But up to now, those programs that support work-based learning are more anecdotal rather than the new standard. In terms of scaling that, we're going to need some more funding, either from the community college system or some kind of public-private partnership. Does that sound right, or do I have that wrong?
I think there are some amazing bright spots in work-based learning. The difficulty always has been that who gets credit for that student, right? Who gets the funding to help to support that student? Where does that funding come from? If it comes from the federal government or the state level, how much innovation can a school district or a university or college actually use to train that student? What is the liability for an employer to have that student on their campus, so to speak? And yet now with Zoom and other digital technologies, those virtual internships, I think, are going to be something that will be key for students moving forward. To have those digital skills, employers are going to need those. So I think we're in a time when, although state budgets are being cut, we need to look at what is that future that we have for our talent, and to advocate for our community, that we make sure that education budgets are not cut as much as has been proposed, because otherwise we will not be able to climb ourselves out of this recession because of COVID.
I think that's right. And I think it's a perfect segue to Jane. Jane, you bring a tremendous set of knowledge and a national perspective to this conversation. Coming into COVID in this kind of future of work conversation, but even more after, what do you think is the most important or pressing issue, facing the workforce development landscape in the Inland Empire more broadly? And what are you seeing in terms of addressing some of these systemic challenges or new emergent ones?
Oh, so thanks, Matt, very much. I am not a native of the Inland Empire, as we know, so please know that I have great respect from the little bit that I know about you. You already have solved major problems because you've come together as a region, and I think that regional thinking is number one. But I think there are a couple things that I would lessons from around the country that I would bring to you, because that's what we do at Working Nation. We look at other people's solutions and try to educate other people so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. So number one, I would say, is focus on your core base of employers. You know, you're rich in healthcare, in education, in government. Don't walk away from that chasing a shiny object of a sexier sector. You know, I mean, really make sure you're servicing those local employers who have been with you so that they can stay and grow, and really use them. Matt, you brought up the term that I love, and that's public-private partnerships. I spent a lot of time at the federal level and some time at state level outside of California. And I don't think today is the day we can rely on government to fund things. I still believe that all solutions are local. If you want to do something right, you have to do it in your own backyard. And you really need to figure out ways to institutionalize the amazing programs that both Mike and Anne Marie are talking about, you know, whether it's work-based learning or whether it's really giving every kid, every student of every age, the soft skills, as you call them. I call them employability skills. But if you look at the Forbes list that they do every year, the 10 top skills from the 10 top employers, communication was number one, Mike. So I don't know whether you've seen that list or you just knew it intuitively, but it's the right thing. So I think that's number one. I think number two is to get to where you want to be in terms of having the right number of people that have baccalaureate and beyond degrees, and to retain them in your local labor force. You're going to have to not just look at the importance of the K-12 talent pipeline. You're going to have to look at multiple talent pools in your community. By that, I mean people that you may not have looked at before, you know, people who have some college but haven't gotten a degree. So how do you get them to quickly earn their degree so they can add to your knowledge base in your employment sector? And I also think you need to look at people who haven't had the opportunity to begin their education yet, and create a program in the Inland Empire that allows people to stack their credentials so they get their first industry recognized credential, and then your local institutions will accept that if it passes muster, and that we always want to keep the integrity and quality of education. But those stackable credentials could get somebody both earning more while they're learning and get them to that degree that you want them to get. But I think we have to be very intentional about both creating those pathways, articulating them, and making sure we're using the community-based organizations to get the word out about them.
Yeah, Jane, you mentioned something there about, you know, not chasing the shiny object or the, you know, the sexy kind of business sectors that we all associate with innovation and technology. But yet, you know, we have some deficiencies in certain areas that, you know, are familiar to us around this region and beyond, in terms of what jobs are located in proximity to what centers, and what those jobs offer in terms of living wages and standards. You know, so what strategies can any region, or maybe this one in general, have you seen been successful, or that Working Nation has noted that regional leaders can undertake to better attract talent or cultivate talent that can support higher wage jobs? I mean, you ran us through some of those, but I think we should be through some of those strategies, but perhaps we could be a little bit more intentional, as you note, like if we have very strong roots to advanced manufacturing in the region, renewable energy. There's no reason we shouldn't be locating these jobs closer in the Inland Empire. How might we get better associated with some of those types of business formations and industries?
So I think everywhere, innovation hubs are built on both creativity and of course innovation, but also on education. So you first of all have to make sure you have that foundation, whether you're looking at the Silicon Valley, whether you're looking at cities that reinvented themselves like Austin, Texas, or Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They used the talent that they had and the industries that they had to really create innovative opportunities. So research and development, what are the local universities doing? Are they, really able to commercialize some of the incredible talent that professors have and really transfer that into a business? And then are there places to incubate those business within the Inland Empire so that as they become toddlers and are able to go from 1 or 2 employees and build out, that they have some infrastructure that they can lean on, sharing costs as well as sharing talent. And I think, when Anne-Marie was talking about the incredible work you're doing in K-12, inserting some entrepreneurship training into the K-12 system, into the 2- and 4-year college system, so people understand that that innovators, entrepreneurs aren't just born, they're cultivated. There are certain skills that we can give them. And finally, I would say, Matt, it's access to capital, right? We know that there's as much innovation in women as there is in men. There's as much in people of color as there is in Caucasians, but the access to capital for those individuals is not equal. We have to make sure that when somebody has a great idea and has created a great project, and COVID has brought that out, right? That they get access to money. We have seen amazing things. We've seen auto plants change over to making ventilators because there was a need. We saw pen companies start manufacturing the pumps in hand sanitizer because that's why we had the hand sanitizer shortage. So I would say, and this is really last, and then I'll give up the microphone here, but we have to be looking at labor market information every day, whether you're in economic development or education, or whether you're in job training. We have to be looking at what are the jobs in demand, and then what are the trends in those areas that abut us. So what's LA doing? What is the Silicon Valley doing? What's the Central Valley doing? So that we can see what those trends are and learn from them and adapt. Because to be an innovation economy, you've got to be nimble.
Yeah. Maybe that's a great segue into our group chat. And maybe this one's more for Mike and Anne-Marie, but Jane mentioned that ability of innovation economies to capture or to really pivot on tech transfer. How do you think the Inland Empire in broad strokes is set up to mobilize an innovation economy based on tech transfer and the innovations that are being created at the numerous universities and education institutions throughout the region?
Well, I would add that, Jane, in laying out what we need to focus on as a region, when she talked at the end there about the access to capital,
yeah,
I would say is probably the one thing that, those who are participating in this seminar today could really think about how we do that as a region. If you look at the entrepreneurship programs that we actually have in the Inland Empire, they are some of the top in the country. You look at Cal State San Bernardino, their entrepreneurship program is ranked always in the top 10. We have our Region 9 community colleges with entrepreneurship programs that are doing fantastic and have access for students who are, whether in business or not, right? And then those programs also go into our K-12 system. They're doing entrepreneurship in high schools, and several of our districts have won awards with their students with the innovative training. So I think we have the ability, we have the people here that can do this work. You think about COVID and how folks had to pivot to help their community. We had several of our students using their 3D printers to print out PPE for first responders, right? And they were raising capital on GoFundMe accounts that were funded through social media. So how do we help maximize that with access to capital when we have educators set up for training? We have the professors, faculty, and teachers doing amazing work with students. but then coordinating that with the business community, I think would be really the next big step for us.
We have several large employers here in the Inland Empire that have come to CBU and laid out, here's what we need. And here's the type of information, here's what we need your students to grasp so we can bring them on board. So the word nimble, and I'm going to add the word flexible, are important with business and with education, and that when business has a request, if education can listen and say, you know what, we can create that. You know what, we can put together curriculum for that. In fact, we're going to do it, and it's not going to be, we're not going to study the problem for 4 years. We're actually going to take it on now and be ready to go. And in that way, it addresses what the employers need, and the employers are ready to go forward and say, we're going to bring those kids on board. So when I'm seeing that come from various employers that are strong here in the Inland Empire, I'm just going touchdown for us, touchdown for the other universities, because we can move quickly to get them educated, and those students are going to stay on board. But also I would say, and I'm not sure we get into this, but I just want to add it anyway. You know, we got to be flexible. Employers here got to be flexible, and they got to be creative, especially when up against the OC and LA County. Let me tell you, one of my sons and my son-in-law work for very good companies in Orange County. COVID comes along. The companies tell them, go ahead, stay at home and work. And they're watching the production and they're going, huh, they're doing a really good job working at home. You know what? You guys aren't going to need to commute anymore. We're just going to let you stay out there. We're going to pay you a lot of money, and you continue to work in the Inland Empire, and we're going to be flexible so you don't have to drive in that horrible commute, and we're going to still employ you. So that's a little bit of a challenge for the IE, where we're trying to keep people here, and the companies in Orange County are even making it easier for people to want to go there. So our employers have to be flexible. They have to be creative. They have to think of ways to keep students that are going to allow them to want to be part of their company. I mean, think about a company like Stater Brothers. If you brought them in here, big company in the IE, maybe the largest employer. You know, the average employees there have been there 17 to 20 years. You know what I want to know? I want to know why. I want to know why, and I'd like to benchmark what they do, because if we do that, employers are going to be able to retain the talent here in the Inland Empire and not be so worried about this topic of how do we keep the brain drain from happening of taking our kids away to other areas, and not that be a worry on every panel such as this.
Yeah, I think pivoting off of that, that reflection, Mike, reminds me of something I said at the onset of this related to our best performing cities index, where we noted that, you know, there's trade-offs. You know, the Inland Empire has a really robust investment in goods movement, and that's served it well, at least up until the COVID collapse. But that industry comes with as trade-offs in terms of environmental impacts and some of the and what that has on the residents of the Inland Empire. In terms of that flexibility, how might we encourage the region to think about embracing some of its core industries like Jane was mentioning earlier, but also thinking about some of those broader social impacts on residents related to the need for renewable energy investments, other types of infrastructure, and how that might fit into a broader, more robust talent hub.
One of the things Jane mentioned in her comments was the idea of educating adults with some college, no degree. In our region, we have 25% of our population, 25% of 4.6 million people have some college, no degree. So who are filling those jobs at warehouses? These are adults who have some college, some coursework, but no degree. So what is it that we can do for them? Well, there are some very specific strategies that we can implement at universities that can help these individuals with their employer get moved up either in the company as these jobs become automated, or as we look at how we're addressing environmental regulations, and their employment will change. And so those are things like having them take one course at a time for 8 weeks, right? Where they're only, you know, that's what they're able to do between childcare and their job. And then that's, you know, a quick turnaround for a certificate, and build those stackable certificates to allow them to get that degree where they can then continue to move up in their company.
And assessing prior learning, you know, if you're not already doing that, and if you are doing it, you should double or triple your efforts. A working adult gains so many skills on the workplace. And if they already have the academics to have qualified to go into post-secondary education, they're ahead of the game. So you could accelerate their path to a degree by letting them test out, you know, CLEP out of a number of, you know, unnecessary courses for them to retake.
Yeah. Mike, any insights there?
Yeah. I'm, you know, when I was at Stanley, one of the things I thought would be really important is for the organization to go on to the college campus. So, you know what, middle level managers, executives, let's go onto the campus and talk to the kids. Let's understand their voice. Let's understand what they're looking for. And I thought it was a great idea. I go, how about that? This is a great idea. But then these managers and at all levels from our organization were reluctant to go on the campus. And I never thought of this, but they were almost clumsy in their communication.
Yeah.
Really not taking the time to understand the college student. And so it's a lot like sales. Well, the only way you become a better is to continue to meet people and sell your product, and all of a sudden you get better and better and better. These managers were maybe a little nervous, maybe a little intimidated, maybe felt a little awkward in going and talking to people that had just gotten degrees and had been trained on the best and had new competencies that maybe those managers did not have. And so really, I think what needs to happen, there needs to be an intentional effort for employers to get out onto campus, teach classes, hold focus groups, and understand these students, because when we do, we'll learn their needs even better. We'll be able to draw upon them and bring them into our organizations. But that takes work. It takes focus. It's not a one-shot deal. It takes time.
Yeah, I think we're reaching close to the end here, so I think we'll move into final thoughts. But you know, Jane, starting with you, you know, the COVID crisis, as we've all mentioned, has really exposed a lot of inherent weaknesses in our systemic lack of investment in access on a number of fronts to capital, access to healthcare, access to infrastructure, especially significant in the Black and Brown community. You know, from a national perspective, when government's working well, what kind of purposeful things have you seen that are able to, you know, bridge some of those gaps and, you know, and bridge some of those gaps in terms of investments and instill more creativity in young people that lead to better outcomes?
So Matt, you hit it. I mean, first of all, before we start talking about these great experiences online, we have to make sure that there's universal broadband and that every home has something better than a smartphone, whether it's a tablet or a laptop or a desktop. Every home should have a computer, and that should be a standard in the United States. Second, we have to make sure that people think they have access to opportunities, so that part of what Working Nation does is tell stories through video oftentimes, just so you see somebody who looks like you. And I'm not just talking about a 16-year-old kid of color who may not speak English as their first language. I'm talking about a 40-year-old who just got laid off in the hospitality industry and is probably not going back to their same employer. How do we show them that there is a place for them if they work hard and try and reskill themselves in government, education, financial services, logistics, whatever it may be? So inspiring people to believe in themselves is just as important to me as giving them the money to do it. Not that money's not always important, but they have to believe that they can do it. And whatever you could do as a community to reinforce the idea, even though your classrooms are crowded, and I know the Cal State and the community college system have waiting lists most of the time. So how do you take that space problem and fix it in your communities? Can employers do classes on the workplace where people are actually getting exposure to work while they're learning their academic class? Could the K-12 system open some space at night so that they could have college classes there? Because space is a big problem. And we as educators need to think that Monday to Friday was great. And I know in some places they didn't even have Friday classes, but we need to open opportunities, not only at night, but on weekends, to really make space for the people who need further education.
Yeah. Anne Marie, Mike, 2 or 3 purposeful things that we need to think about specifically to the Inland Empire in terms of COVID recovery, access, enhancing access and investments.
You know, I hate following Jane because she's so much of what I was thinking about, because those are key points for
Mine melded, Emery.
Totally did. You know, when the COVID crisis first hit, as a organization, we convened a task force of educators, community members, government officials, and said, what needs to happen for our people, right? What can we do? And so one of the things that came out of it is this iestudents.org. This website is a student-facing website with all kinds of resources for students, including free college support. And so these are anyone, whether they're right out of high school or, you know, an adult needing to go back to school. There is an ability for you to connect to a community organization in their specific part of this large region to get that support that they need to move forward. This also includes support for broadband access. We know people need that desperately. And it is a lengthy process if you are low income to go through this. Yeah. And so what we've done as an organization is put together different sources of funding to support different organizations that do this work. One called Great Harvest here in our region, who helps walk people through getting that broadband access, and finds low cost devices for individuals, even a laptop for $100. So it's possible when we come together and actually collaborate as a region. We have talent here and we have the ability to do well by our citizenry. And so it's really a matter of us all continuing this conversation. And it's not just a one-day event in this tipping conference. It is future conversations every day, working to do the best by the people that live here.
Yeah. Mike, anything on 2 or 3 pressing investments, challenges that we need to address?
Sure. One thing, you know, well, first of all, sitting between Jane and Anne Marie is an honor and a privilege, and I could listen to them all day. So
right back at you.
No, I love it. You know, you'd expect a career center dude to talk about internships, right?
Right.
Maybe 1 word or 2 on that. If you're an employer and you're thinking about that, make sure it's purposeful. Make sure there's a job description, and make sure there are people there to coach. Yeah. Coach daily, coach weekly, because when you just turn someone loose, it doesn't work that way. And maybe a plug to the WRCOG group. I got to tell you, they got this fellowship program going on where they interview students from the colleges throughout the Inland Empire, and then they bring in anywhere from 15 to 20 and assign them out to various cities and municipalities and county groups, and they work under those. That's just a win. They need to like triple or quadruple that program. I'm telling you right now, if I were in city and county government all day, I would say get more, because that's where I would draw my talent from and plug them into my city or plug them in for my county, because they're getting prepared. Yeah. So it's a fantastic thing they are doing. It's just incredible. And I would sink my teeth into that all day if I worked for a city or county and learn from that, and I'd be picking up those kids left and right, because the training ground is absolutely perfect. No, that's tremendous insight. I think we got a lot out of your collective experience and knowledge here. I don't want Elisa to yell at me here, but Rick and the team at WRCOG are tremendous. I really appreciate working with them. And with that, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. Really appreciate your time, and looking forward to questions from the audience. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, good morning again, Rachel Singer with WRCOG. As a quick reminder before we jump into the live Q&A, if you would like to submit a question, be sure to go to slido.com or scan the QR code at the bottom of the screen and type in the code #3. And as another note, if by chance we do not get to your question in the allotted time, we will be archiving them and then reaching out to the speakers individually to provide a written response, and we'll send that after the webinar concludes. But thank you guys so much for being on our panel today. To start off the live Q&A section, Anne-Marie, can you just share about how we can practically foster what you described as regional capital?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Rachel. You know, in our remarks, we were talking much more about entrepreneurship and getting capital for either small businesses or individual entrepreneurs. And I think practically, you know, if we can foster additional regional collaborations, one of the key components of growing inland achievement and other organizations in the region, to focus in on what are things that we can actually practically do together for joint applications. Many projects now require that collaboration, and recognizing that, you know, if we're willing to go out there and work on getting those funds, there are plenty of students here that we need to support, plenty of entrepreneurs that we need to support. We don't need to fight over those types of projects, right? And instead, you know, collaborate on those grant applications. You know, GIA is always willing to help support with grant writing, as are many other organizations. And working with our local businesses who oftentimes have funds that are dedicated for nonprofit capital building opportunities. And so, you know, if you as an organization can't apply for a grant, putting that information out to your colleagues and collaborators to say, hey, here's a great opportunity. So really being willing to share that information and always looking to find other creative ways to share with others so we can get more funds to our region to support our students.
Mm-hmm. It's facilitating that conversation between entities. So Mike, we actually have a question for you that came in from the audience from Scott Brovsky. He works at UCR, and it says, Mike, how do you recommend that those of us in higher education do a better job of connecting our college graduates to opportunities with our Inland Empire-based tech startups? So he hears from dozens of graduates a month who don't even know to look in our region for tech jobs or internships.
Good question, Scott. I think it's important that when you're talking to various employers, your career center talks to various employers, as do the career centers at some of the other fine universities in the area, whether it's RCC, La Sierra, Cal State University, San Bernardino. It's important that you get out into the community. Maybe that's through a chamber of commerce, maybe that's through WRCOG or whatever, and discover those employers. Learn about those employers, learn what's going on in your area. And when you're doing that, some of those opportunities will bubble to the top. And when they're bubbling up, it's important that universities seize upon those, what they learn, and reach out to those employers so that they can then inform their students. And also, I think one of the other things as well, I would recommend highly people in higher education do connect with their career center. A lot of times there's a bit of a wall. And it's not intentional, it's maybe a little unintentional. But when you're talking to them, you learn what the career center people are gathering from outside. And that will help educators when they're talking to their classes to inform them what's going on in the area and where they can apply. So I think that's a good thing as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So the next question is more for you, Jane. The idea of access came up a few times in conversation. So there's a lot of different components to access, a lot of what seems to maybe like a lot of different places to start. So my question to you is, how do we begin addressing the challenge of access in our community?
Well, the first thing is to make sure that everybody in your community sees themselves as able and invited to get a post-secondary credential. And that could mean a degree, a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree, or it could mean going for a credential that gets them a job in 6 months to a year. So I think the easiest way to convince people that post-secondary education is for them is to have them try it. Dual enrollment is great. If your K-12 system can build on the progress you've already made in dual enrollment, whether it's through career technical education or through academics, that really does it. And the second is to make sure, and this is not only for high school kids, this is for everybody in your community, regardless of age, who's thinking about going back to school, everybody should fill out a FAFSA. You know, in January when those come out, it doesn't cost you anything, get it done. You can see what aid you're eligible for, whether in terms of Pell Grants or subsidized loans from the federal government. And when you know that, you can go and look for programs that fit into financial capabilities.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And then Matt, more towards in your arena, can you share maybe some of your insights related to the future of work and where the region's best opportunity areas might be, and how generally maybe we can just better work together? Because it does sound like a lot of the different components of creating these talent pipelines are oriented around this collaboration mentality.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. There's a report that I could point everybody to on our website, and I'll send you the link that we just did on preparing California for the future of work. But what that report was really oriented around was addressing this access and equity gap from a long-term economic development perspective, and hopefully with the conclusion that we need to get more purposeful about place-based investment strategies. And to Anne Marie and Jane and Mike's point, that regional collaboration is really vital. We kind of glance over that a lot and say it in passing, like collaboration, but purposefully building talent pipelines that support robust industry sectors is really vital here. Looking at some of the key assets around the states and our regions that we can build on and further invest, that not only support business formation in key sectors that support high wage jobs and high skilled jobs, but lead to other connectivity in infrastructure like housing. The state has a massive equity gap. We talk about housing as if it's its own problem, but it really talks to the equity challenge that we have in our communities and in our regions. So addressing that either through a consortia of business and employment and other community partners to think about the types of place-based investment strategies that will build to more long-term equity and inclusion is really vital.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Rachel,
Mike?
I loved one word that Matt said, and I just want to shout it out: purposeful. This is not going to happen unless people really make it a priority, set goals, and measure those goals. It's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Mike, we actually have a question coming in from the audience from Andrea Howard. And she says, Mike indicated that Inland Empire employers need to be flexible to accommodate remote workers consistent with OC firms. I think she's probably referring to your son. Do any panelists have thoughts on the need for more or better housing options and the role of livable communities to attract individuals to live in the IE and work remotely for companies elsewhere? Mike, maybe we can start with you.
Well, that's
put you on the spot.
No. Yes, I think she's taken that from when I was talking about my son and son-in-law. Employers are going to need to be flexible here in the Inland Empire because the OC is constantly thinking about ways that they can take our talent from the Inland Empire and gather them up and keep them for themselves, right? And so whether it's understanding their employees, their family needs, their need to maybe go coach their kids, the need to have flex time, all of those things create an advantage. And I think employers too, what they really need to work on here in the Inland Empire is to create a culture. When employees feel that they belong to a culture, they're going to stay. They really are. I used the Stater Brothers example before. Think of Loma Linda University, think of Kaiser, all out here, think of Riverside Union School District. All of those employers in this area have created a culture and people do want to stay. And when that happens, that works well for the IE.
Mm-hmm. Anne Marie, do you have any thoughts to add to that?
I would also add that we know that many of our students are now deciding to stay local particularly with this COVID experience, right? We know that the applications are increasing at our community colleges specifically. And so in the past, when you may not have been able to find that talent locally because there was not a large enough pool, we are going to have a large enough pool here. And so really rethinking about your outreach and also looking at your HR requirements, that saying, you know, what really are the characteristics that you need for an employee? Is it really a bachelor's degree? Is it maybe more of an associate's degree? Is it a technical certificate? What are those requirements that you have for that individual? And be really honest with career centers and others that can help you to find that talent pool. Faculty at our colleges and universities are great resources to get interns and to, you know, bring new people into your space. And so really rethinking how we may do our work outreach for additional talent.
Jane, we have another
Rachel,
question. Oh, go ahead. No, please.
I think to Anne Marie's point there, we tend to have two challenges related to housing in the state. Either we don't have enough jobs near housing, or we don't have enough housing near jobs. So to the former, I think what we need to do, especially in the Inland Empire, is think about how do we bring higher skill, high wage jobs to the region, so that those jobs are located where to my earlier point about one of the better assets that's throughout the Inland Empire is housing tends to be a little cheaper. So that's a potentially major driver for businesses looking to locate, or business formation, entrepreneurial growth throughout the whole region.
Jane, we have another question coming in from the audience, and they're curious, can you share the best model you've seen in a community that really connects public and private partners?
So I've seen a number of really interesting models in California specifically, and you know, I'm from the East Coast, but in California, I really love what the San Diego Partnership is doing. It's not only tackling high quality training and getting at that access point, not only for high school kids coming right out, but for adults seeking, but it's also tackling financing. And you know, with their ISA model, you don't pay until you start earning. That's really refreshing. There's lots of ISA models happening over the country, but San Diego's is pretty unique, and I would take a look at that one. I would say that you guys are doing a great job. You've already done the hard work of bringing higher ed to the table 2- and 4-year, and your businesses. And, you know, I think WRCOG does an amazing job bringing those people together and having the discussions, because it's all about open communication wherever the partnerships are. And I would end with one, you know, that is having a very difficult time right now. Everyone's heard about the aviation work that was done in Washington State, Montana, and Idaho. Really, those 3 states in the region came together and really decided how they were going to help the industry 5 years ago. Well, that industry is going to be really slow coming back. So what they've done is really look to see what other manufacturing things they can do. And one of the Idaho manufacturers realized that they made pens at one time too, ink pens, you know, regular ballpoint pens. And the inside of a pen is almost exactly in engineering style what a pump would be for sanitizer bottles. So they kept themselves afloat by switching like that and making that. So I mean, look, manufacturers are innovators, right? And you look to them.
And I think that really does take that, if you will, cross-cultural engagement from both the public and private sectors. Anne Marie, so you talked a little bit during the panel discussion about the anticipated increase in students studying locally here in the IE. So how can we use this momentum, maybe for lack of a better word, to really further establish pipelines for the next generation of workers?
Certainly, I think we have the beginnings of amazing programs throughout our region, or the 2-county area, that show what it can do for students who have, you know, the career pathway outlined for them and are able to study in that particular field, and then understand what it means to get a post-secondary credential, certificate, or degree to go into that workplace. What I would also add is that, you know, even though we have a large youth population, we also have a large adult population that has some college and no degree. We have over 25%, according to last census data, has some college and no degree. And so that adult workforce that we have access to, we can really look at what are those career paths that are continuing to emerge that Matt mentioned and others, to really think about how do we restructure the educational outputs that these students can go into, right? So is it, is it shorter term cohort model training? There's some fantastic examples around the country that are working hard to educate adults as well. And so these are, huge portions of our population that are going to be here and that want to probably stay local for those jobs. And now that we know that digital distance learning works, and we also know that digital employment works, right? That we can do this at a large scale, and we'll continue to improve and adjust as these things continue. But we have the opportunities to be innovative in this space, and let's not limit ourselves to what we think we needed to now go back to. We're in a new world, and let's embrace it and figure out what are the great things that we've done. Use this crisis as the opportunity that it is to continue to build on some great innovations that we have.
Definitely. And I think that even what you were saying about virtual internships, we actually had a question on that, but we are running a little bit short on time. So I'll finish with this last question, actually for Mike. Someone's curious, are there any really good models of virtual internships that we should be paying attention to? And to Anne Marie's point, maybe is that the future of what it could look like moving forward?
I think it is. At our engineering school, there's a number of employers that are looking to hire our students for virtual internships. So they're having them do the work at home. And it's really, right now, it's trial and error. We're learning, it's perfect at it. But I think the good thing is employers are ready to put their toe in the water and try it. So that's what I would encourage the audience out there to do. There's always a little bit of reluctance, but just put your toe in. And then eventually you'll put your leg in and you'll be fully in the water and go, hey, we're pretty good at doing this right now. So it's a matter of a little bit of trial and error, but to move forward with it, students are ready for you because the medium they're doing a lot of communication on right now is through this. I mean, even our mock interview program, real quick, it's all going to be virtual this next semester. But that's good practice for students. They're ready for employers and they're ready to help embrace a virtual internship and to help employers with that.
Definitely. It's encouraging to see how our world is really innovating through the various disruptions and moving forward in that. But thank you all so much for participating in our talent panel and for being on our special Future Forward broadcast. I wanted to say thank you and thank you for your continued investment in the region. So up next, we will have a Focus on Innovation Part 1 presentation. So stay tuned for that.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
See you guys.